Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and thank you very much for joining us today, either on the radio or on TV. Well, more specifically, on YouTube or on Facebook. We are there streaming live. You can watch us if you want to. I mean, it's not like we have graphics or animation or anything like that, but we are there if you want to watch us. However, Bobby Conway, one of the panelists on the program today, is wearing a really cool T-shirt today. Bobby's the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. Greg Laurie, if you are listening, you'll want to tune in to Facebook or YouTube because I know you're a big Steve McQueen fan, so you will love Bobby Conway's T-shirt today. But Bobby, thanks for joining us on the Bobby Cam. And here in the studio, it's Mike Chaddick, the pastor of Image Church Best Coast. I mean Left Coast. I mean West Coast. That's
all
where
of the above.
All of the above. Yes.
Yep.
San Juan Capistrano. San Juan Capistrano. No, that's not it.
Oh yeah, they're actually there's a new community
community.
Yeah,
oh, okay.
And it is a combination of those.
Why not? It's because people like me kept confusing it, so they just
exactly.
Yes. All right. So maybe I should go be the mayor of that city.
You should. We'd love to have you down there.
San Juan Capistrano is where Image Church OC is located. You can find out more about them at imagechurchoc.com. And here we are on this Wednesday, ready to talk to you at 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. So as we wait, the phone lines are already halfway full, so we'll get there in just a little bit. But I want to start with a question that was sent in online. There's a few ways you can send your question to us. There's Facebook Messenger. There's Instagram. There's our flagship radio station's website, kwave.com. New website. Go there, find the Pastor's Perspective page. You can find archives of the program as well as short features and a form that you can fill out to send us your question. But the best way to get an answer is to call us, grab an open line at 888-564-6173, and we'll try to get to you. This question here was sent in. It is, I grew up Catholic, but doing Ouija boards, levitating, seances, etc. It tormented me in high school. My bed would shake violently, and I would go home with boys so I wouldn't be alone. In my early 20s, 2 demons came in my room. I didn't know what to do, so I just kept saying the Our Father. They looked at each other and said, "She really believes." After that, everything stopped. Fast forward about 10 years, I became a Christian, but I still know stuff that I shouldn't know. When someone gets sick, I know if they are getting better or dying. I know stuff about people that is a bit deeper than intuition. I can tell everyone what astrology sign they are, and I have to admit, I feel special. There is a side of me that is scared by it, and there's a side of me that makes me feel powerful, which is scary and at the same time enticing. I feel like Satan is still playing with me, and I don't want to play anymore. Mike, what would you say to this person who sent in their question?
Well, obviously, there's some unique features to the question, and obviously dealing with some of the occult, the Ouija boards and these demonic experiences and things like that. Obviously, there's uniqueness to that. But at the same time, the idea of 10 years later, I'm a Christian, and there's some things that's not unique, because everyone is born sinful, and you spend some time in the world, and you probably know things, and you've seen things, and you've done things that you shouldn't have done. And those things can sort of maybe it is an appropriate word, can come back to haunt you, so to speak. And so, again, I think it's not so much focusing on those things as they arise and trying to get rid of them. It's to continue to focus yourself on what is good, on what is pure, on what is peaceable, and what is true. To focus on the Lord, focus on His Word, keep your eyes there. I think, many times it's sort of like the waves of the sea when Peter was on the boat with Jesus, and, when he's looking at Jesus, he's fine, even though the waves are there. It's not like when he looks at Jesus, the waves aren't there. They were. It's just that when he's looking at Jesus, the waves don't overtake him. But when he takes his eyes off of Jesus to focus on the waves, that's when Peter begins to sink. And I think it's the same kind of thing in this situation. I wouldn't sit there and think and focus your time and energy on these experiences that you're having, that some of which, at least obviously, arise as a result of a past dabbling in the occult. And I would instead, again, focus your heart, your mind, your attention, your actions on the Lord. And if there's things that the Bible tell you you shouldn't be saying or doing or whatnot, then those are the kinds of things you need to exercise some self-control and discipline and, commit those things to the Lord.
For sure. Now, we might start getting more questions like this in the next few weeks with Halloween coming up. And don't know, I guess as you guys call in with those questions, we'll answer them. But thank you very much for sending in your question on the form. Here's another one that was sent in before we go to the phones at 888-564-6173. Griselda wrote in, and Bobby, I'll have you talk about this one because I know what a fan you are of snakes. And this is what this question is about. I'm joking. I know you hate snakes. But Griselda writes in, my question is regarding a dream I had a couple of nights ago. In my dream, I was trying to park a car, and a black snake came to the side of my car and was trying to align itself with my car. Then my sister came along, and I was explaining to her that a snake was on the ground. Then my dad came along, and he picked up the snake, threw it in the trash can. When I looked in the trash can, I didn't see it. I told him it had changed color and was hiding. No one in my dream was scared, only I was. The thing is, I hate snakes. I fear snakes. I woke up from the dream at 3 a.m. and felt fear. I didn't even want to go to the restroom, afraid that a snake was on the ground. Am I being ridiculous? Why am I dreaming this crazy stuff? Bobby Conway, what do you say to Griselda?
Oh my goodness. I'm actually laughing because the irony of the question. I was just talking to my son and I said, Dawson, do you ever have dreams about snakes? And he says, oh man, all the time. And I said, man, I had a dream last night with some big scary snakes. I mean, these things were vicious. And I just hate it when that happens to myself. And I don't know how to explain what's going on with that. Honestly, I mean, Freud talked about, the dreams and in the subconscious level. Do I think that there is something that could be going on there? Perhaps our fears, they get locked into our memory and they kind of seep down into the subconscious level. And then during the dreams that we have, perhaps, there's some access to that, but I would not consider myself, worthy to talk on this subject on any level of depth outside of the fact that in the Bible, when you see dreams, God gives dreams at different times. I mean, Joseph had dreams that we know of, and these dreams would be prophetic, dreams that would take place. And so I wouldn't discount that. I mean, the Bible talks in the book of Joel, that in the end times, I mean, people are going to dream, right? And there's going to be amazing things that'll happen in that way. When it comes to snakes showing up in your dream, I know in the past, I used to hear people say, oh, that means that you're thinking a lot about, sexual thoughts or whatever. And so then I would think, oh, goodness, if I had a dream about snakes, does that mean I'm a pervert? And I'm thinking, I don't see the connection there as, I'm not sitting around just racked in lust. So I just think that I fear snakes and it shows up in my dreams, perhaps. Does the enemy capitalize on us in our dreams and give us images of things that we fear? Or does he get a hold of the mother and that cares about her children so deeply, and she has a dream that something bad's going to happen to her kids? These are the kind of things that I think can happen, but we shouldn't be too bulldogmatic about it. I think at the end of the day, what we do is we walk out of our fear, remembering that God did not give us a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power, love, and self-discipline, and that he who is in us is greater than he who is in the world.
Mike Chaddock?
Yeah, I would also just say, when we're awake, not every thought we have is from God, though we believe God can speak to us. And when you're asleep, yes, God can speak to you in dreams, but not every dream is from God. So I just think people need to be wise and discerning about that. And again, like Bobby said, obviously in the Bible itself, God has communicated to people in dreams. So we don't want to rule that out a priori and just say, oh no, God's not allowed or never would speak in a dream. However, we shouldn't go the other extreme and say every dream is from the Lord and has a meaning. Like if we found out the person asking this question watched Anaconda or Snakes on a Plane right before they went to bed, or Indiana Jones, right? And Indy, good old Indy, he hated snakes too, and then you add bad pizza from like a week ago and went to bed, it's like, okay, well, that's not a dream from the Lord. You just shouldn't be watching movies and eating bad food. So I just think, again, can God speak to us in dreams? Yes. That does not mean all dreams are from the Lord, and we have to be critical and discerning.
All right. Speaking of dreams, here's a question that we haven't gotten in a while, but this conversation reminded me. People have asked in the past, if you sin in your dreams, is that considered like a sin? For example, let's go a little extreme here. What if in your dream you blaspheme the Holy Spirit? And now people are thinking, oh my gosh, I just committed the unpardonable sin. Does it count? I guess you could say. Mike, what do you think?
That's an interesting question. Obviously, that's an extreme example.
Yes.
I'd prefer a milder one. But, I would just say it's unclear to me to what extent we're active in dreams versus passive. I think we probably all had dreams where you really felt involved, and like maybe even in the dream sequence. And again, this, of course, a lot of this is your memory of it, which might not have been the same thing as the actual experience of it. But, we were more active. But I've had dreams where I felt like it was happening kind of against my will. Like this just whole scenario is going on and I'm just kind of a neutral observer or whatever. So, I'd be inclined to say no. I don't think you are. Again, it is a dream, and so I would kind of be inclined. But at the same time, I feel like if I had a dream such as the one you described, where I did do that, I would honestly. It doesn't do me any harm to just pray, Lord, continue to grant me faith. I pray I would never blaspheme you, and never come to that point, whatever. But I would have a hard time saying that you did this thing because you had a dream about it. I find that very difficult.
All right. Bobby, not sure if you wanted to chime in. If not, we'll go to the phones.
Yeah, I agree with Mike. I could say that there is a level of, let's say you're struggling with resentment towards somebody and that shows up in your dream because you've been thinking about the bitterness. And then you find yourself just, roundhousing the person and you kind of alert in it as well. There can maybe be some of those moments where your dream can feed your vengeance or desire for vengeance. If you feel like, like you could snap out of it. So there are these moments where you're dreaming and you wake up and you're like, what happened? And you just know you're in the world of dreams. And then you got your other dreams where you have one foot in the world of reality and another foot in the dream. And I think that perhaps you could make a choice. So, for example, if you're slipping into some kind of a lustful situation in your dream, there's dreams where people could beat themselves up about lustful things that happen, but they're totally asleep, right? And I wouldn't say they're guilty. There's another dream that could happen where you've got one foot in reality and one foot in the dream, and you might want to just stay in the dream because you're enjoying where the dream's taking you. And you have to be careful in those ways. So I give you one example of pleasure and in another desire kind of revenge, which would also be a form of pleasure for somebody. But obviously, we can't really help where the dream begins. Sometimes perhaps we can put an end to it, but I don't know exactly where we cross that line.
All right, very good. Now let's go to the phones on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number to call until 4 p.m. Pacific Time. 888-564-6173. And we're going to begin our time on the phones by going to Las Vegas. Hello, Kim. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hello. Hi.
Hi. How are you listening to the program today?
I'm a faithful podcast listener.
Oh, nice. So you're going to listen to yourself after the fact.
Yes.
Very cool. So how can we help you today, Kim?
Okay, so my question is, I have a friend, and we were having this discussion regarding courtship and marriage. So the situation that she's in is she's courting someone. They are both, when they entered the courtship, they were both believers. He is going through somewhat, based off of what she expresses to me, I think a crisis of faith, where he has a lot of questions that is making him, I guess, like leery in his faith. And some people have told her, well, this is a sign that you guys are not supposed to date and you guys are not supposed to get married. More or less, like, throw him to the sea and move on. But I think her mentality is, if she were married, she would not be able to do that. Like, if she were married, I think she has like more of a marriage mentality concerning the relationship. So if she were married and her husband was going through a crisis of faith, her first thought wouldn't be to throw him back to the sea.
Right.
You know, now it's unequally. So my question is, if I were to explain to her, is there a switch? Like, is there a courtship mentality, and then after you get married, you put on like a marriage mentality concerning the covenant, or like, is it the same thing?
Right. So like after you get married, for better or for worse, no matter what happens, you stick with it. But while you're still dating, it's okay to, like she said, throw him into the sea. I think those were the words she used. I'll start with Bobby, since he wrote a book on this topic called Doubting Toward Faith. What would you say to Kim's friend, Bobby?
Yeah, I'm actually, writing on doubt today, as I'm a contributing writer to Sean McDowell's updated book on apologetics for the next generation, where I'm writing a chapter for him on doubt. This is a topic near and dear my heart. My next book coming out in April with Tyndale, Does Christianity Still Make Sense? Where basically I share how I thought I was going to be potentially an apostate, or I certainly feared that. And it was brutal for my family. It was brutal for my wife. This went on for several years, but I hated my doubts. And so I think what I would want to know if I was in this situation is I would want to know, does he hate his doubts? I mean, there's some people that become progressive Christians. They kind of just celebrate their doubts. They see their doubts as a form of feeling superior toward those who aren't thinking on the level that they're thinking. And that's a very toxic place to be. I missed Jesus tremendously when I felt like he was, hard to reach. But doubt metastasizes. It bores into your brain and splits the mind. And it's like a disease that will wear a person down, spiritually fatiguing them, making you feel like a fraud when you're just trying to hold it together. And I experienced a lot of these feelings. I mean, I ended up in counseling, ended up on antidepressants. I was suicidal in ideation over this. I mean, it was huge because I had a national platform as a Christian apologist. I was a pastor, but I was like, what am I supposed to do? Just step down from what I'm doing? Like, I hate these doubts, and I'm thankful that I had some leaders around me who were saying, as long as you're trying to work through this, and that's why my book was called Doubting Toward Faith. Doubt means to split the mind. You can doubt toward unbelief, or you could doubt toward belief. And so in this situation, I think you definitely push pause because in a marriage context, if this person, sees the doubts metastasizing and doesn't address them, and this person's just surrounding himself with, the critics that are criticizing his faith, then, we can see where this will go. Doubt's not a Christian problem, it's a human problem. And in the absentee of certainty, there'll always be room for doubt. The question is, which worldview best closes the doubt gap? And so I think pound for pound, Christianity is the strongest case for answering the biggest questions of life. But I had to learn how to live with the answers that I did have and rejoice in those, realizing that, I found myself reflecting in Italy for about 20 minutes just on a pigeon. And I was just meditating on this pigeon and the dynamics of the pigeon and the way that the pigeon moved. And I thought, I can't even come to the bottom of this pigeon. Like, I'll never know everything about this pigeon. I'll never know how many miles this pigeon's flown. I'll never know, what mother hatched this thing or whatever you want, gave birth to this thing. I'll never know how much food this pigeon has ate. I'll never know how strong the sense of smell is of this pigeon. I mean, I could talk the rest of the program with questions that I was raising about a pigeon. So here we are with a 3.5-pound brain trying to figure out a God that is so far beyond us. So I would say, slow down. That would be my advice. Encourage this person that you're dating to think about, moving through the questions that he has, but the truth is for every book I read to answer the doubts that I had, I collected another set of doubts and questions. So our Christian faith, like my faith, was being reduced to a Q&A session with God, and it has to move beyond that. And so I want to just say he should be reading some books about addressing doubt. He should be surrounding himself with the right people. And if you sense that he hates his doubts, he's seeking God, that he loves God, and he's just in a spiritual battle, okay. But if you sense he's kind of enjoying these doubts, you're going to really have to be careful, because once you say I do, there's nothing in the Bible that says that you can, walk away from that. In fact, the Bible says if you're married to an unbeliever, if that person wants to leave, fine. But if they want to stay, you're in it.
Mike Chaddick.
Yeah. So for your friend, Kim, and again, I think as Christians, we're not supposed to intentionally, knowingly marry a non-Christian. We're not to be unequally yoked. The situation arises for various reasons, whether two people were non-believers when they got married and then one person converts, so they have, an unequally yoked marriage in that regard, but it wasn't something, neither of them were yoked to the Lord when they entered into it. Or there can be the case where somebody is a believer and they knowingly, we make mistakes, we sin, and they said, hey, you know what, even though this person's not a believer, I'm going to do it anyway, and then they find themselves in that situation. So I think, right now is the time where, for your friend, there should be some degree of certainty of the genuineness of this person's faith before moving and making a covenant. And like Bobby said, at the end of the day, it's sure, you can always raise more questions, but I think we all, if nothing else, I think we can arrive at a reasonable assurance that somebody is a genuine believer. And even a genuine believer, and I think there's levels of doubt, right? There's difference between doubting your ecclesiology. Should it be a Presbyterian government or Episcopal government? I'm in doubt over this versus I don't know that God really exists. Those are two very, very different levels of doubt. So if it's fundamental doubt about, the authority of the Bible, that's a big one. The inspiration of the Bible, if it's denial of possibly the existence of God, deity of, these are fundamental, foundational, essential things. And so at the minimum for your friend, it wouldn't be wise to move into a marriage at that point. But I think you also mentioned maybe there were some other friends or family or whoever it was kind of advising, hey, it's time to split immediately. And that's something where, again, I don't know the specifics and the people actually involved. It's a tough call. But what I didn't hear from you is that this person outright rejected the faith. If that's the case, yes, I agree. It's time to call that off. There's no point in having a courtship when you know this person is not a believer. You shouldn't be getting into that because the end of that would be marriage and you should not be marrying this person. But if it's simply they've in confidence, in trust, they've opened up and shared what might be actually a vulnerability, right? Like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I would just, and again, I'm not saying lay one's own, faith down on the altar and be willing to jeopardize that and your obedience to God in order to help this person. The Bible says, consider yourself lest you be tempted also. So you need to make sure you're okay but at the same time, if it's not outright rejection, I don't think I could say it would absolutely be right to just, break it off with this person right now. But I would say you would not want to move forward into marriage at this point And I would say, get some help, talk to somebody, talk to mature believers, pastors. Bobby's written and done a lot of work on this. So I would definitely say, as a couple in the courtship process, this would be something very telling. And I think this could really be something that could, honestly, if it's meant to go to marriage, I think it's really going to help. It's going to bond them together. They're going to get to learn and grow in tremendous ways. On the other hand, it may be the very thing that makes it clear, all right, this is not a union that we believe God is leading me to commit to.
Yeah. Bobby Conway?
Yeah, I think there's a distinction that can be helpful too between questions and doubts. And I would put it like this: all doubts entail questions, but not all questions entail doubt. And so, yes, doubt is a species of questions, right? Like questions can take the form of doubts. But sometimes people are just asking questions, and it doesn't mean that they're doubting. What doubting does is it really gets under your skin and causes you to wonder, have I been duped? Have I missed it? And it can be agonizing, and it's painful because you feel like what you cherish the most, namely God, you're questioning the reality of that. And as Mike so aptly put, that can come on different levels. What's sad, though, is in the church, we haven't made room for doubt. A lot of times Christians hang out and they don't feel safe being vulnerable, as Mike said. And that's not a healthy discipleship culture, to make people feel like they're not allowed to express their doubts. So even as I wrote today, I put, I once heard the phrase, if I only had a penny for the times I heard the phrase, we aren't to doubt God, but trust him. Okay, but what if having certain doubts answered can help someone better trust God? Unexpressed doubt is still doubt. Isn't it better to have expressed doubt that can at least be addressed? It's hard to address unexpressed doubts, and unexpressed doubts don't go away just because a person is silent. So we can encourage people to get their doubts on the table so that we can address them. And I think that that's really important, because what people sometimes think is, I got to stay silent in this. Well, Jude says, be merciful to those who doubt. Well, what does he mean by that? How would you know they're doubting unless they're expressing them to be merciful to them?
Mike?
Yeah, I mean, and it'll say a lot about the relationship, how you handle things like this, right? I mean, again, not knowing exactly where somebody is coming from, it makes it difficult. But at the same time, like we're saying, I think in a relationship, especially, and if I have this correctly, the man in the courtship with your friend Kim, if for example, he knows, hey, you're a believer and you're only going to marry me if I'm a believer. If that were the case, to express doubt then is really to acknowledge, hey, that's to me, that's sort of a virtuous act, because you're not hiding something. Rather, you're bringing something to the table and saying, hey, here's this issue, here's this thing, and that can be a very positive thing, because I think, too often, whether it's about this or something else, people hide things. Pertinent information that somebody else would want to know before you get married, and I think, and obviously it takes wisdom and discernment to know when and at what point and to what extent you share X, Y, and Z. But at the same time, I definitely think there's key things that people need to know. Obviously, if you're a Christian, you need to know they're in the faith. But there's many other things, just in terms of livability. Like, I may love you and I'm glad you're a brother or sister in the Lord, but if you've got that habit and you have not broken it, I literally can't live with that. And so for a person to hide or pretend that that's not there would not be a good thing. So we definitely want relationships of trust that can bear the weight of truth. And if the truth in this case is there's some doubt, then again, I think navigate that accordingly, but just keep in mind, the number one thing is you're honoring the Lord, and Kim, your friend, is responsible to the Lord for this relationship. You want to make sure that the Lord is honored in it. And if the person's not a believer, you should not marry them. You're not supposed to. On the other hand, I don't see anything in the Bible that says just, discard them per se, at least at this point, as I understand it.
Yeah, Bobby, about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I think it's really important that when you are dating somebody, that you take enough time in the relationship for trials to emerge so that you can see how you handle them and so that you can understand what the issues are so that you can go into marriage, as Ruth Graham said, with your eyes wide open instead of with your eyes half shut.
I think I've heard that as a bit of marriage advice before, where, the couple is there with the counselor and he asks, so when was your last argument? And they say, oh, we've never had an argument in our entire relationship. And the pastor says, okay, go have an argument and then we'll talk. But anyway, all right. Kim, thank you for calling us with your question today on Pastor's Perspective. Hope that helps your friend. And we are going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with more of your questions here on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number. 888-564-6173. We're back on Pastor's Perspective. Thank you so much for listening on the radio, maybe here in Southern California on one of our two flagship stations, FM 107.9 and AM 1110, reaching a huge portion of the Southland. And for the portions that we can't reach, there's our sister station, KSDW. We've also got Equip FM listening on the East Coast and Living Water Radio in Texas. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube. Thank you so much for listening and for watching today's episode. My name is Brian Perez, and answering your questions today, we've got Mike Chaddock, the pastor of Image Church in San Juan Capistrano, California. And on the Bobby Cam, we've got Bobby Conway, the pastor of Image Church in Charlotte, North Carolina, also the author of the book Doubting Toward Faith, and the forthcoming sequel, How My Doubts Almost Pigeonholed My Faith. Look for that at a bookstore near you soon.
You see what he did
awesome. There? Yes, I love that.
Well, thank you. I'm here all week.
Good.
Maybe. Yep. All right. 888-564-6173. Maybe not. 888-564-6173. To San Bernardino we go. Here is Artenice. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective.
Hi. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for calling.
Okay, so I'm just a little bit confused as it pertains to giving. A lot of different churches, when they do the offering, they have you stand up and you either walk around the offering bucket and you give your offering. But my question is, when the Bible talks about doing your charitable deeds or you're giving your alms, does that pertain to the offering as well? Because it just feels like I don't want to be seen giving in the offering. I want to be able to benefit from the purpose of me giving. And if he says that I shouldn't do my charitable deeds to be seen, then I don't want to get up and walk around and be seen giving. I want to give in secret.
Now, Artenise, is this something that happens at the church you go to?
Yes, it's happened at the churches that I've gone to, yes. And so I'm just conflicted because I don't want to not benefit from the purpose of me giving. And if that scripture isn't applicable to the offering and the tithe, then I don't want to misconstrue it, you know?
For sure. Mike, what do you say to Artenise?
Yes, that is an excellent question, and I'm glad you asked it. It's very, very important. I think, first of all, noting the context, Jesus is warning his disciples, his followers, against the religion of the Pharisees. That's very important to understand. And what Jesus is ultimately getting at, though he gives some sort of practical application or advice on how to ensure this, he gives a principle, and it's important to acknowledge the principle because the application can differ. So just right off the top, to give you an example, is it wrong to give give financially your tithes publicly or not? And I would actually say it depends. It could or could not be. And you say, well, what do you mean? What does it depend on? It depends on the principle. The principle was, do not do it in order to be seen. In other words, Jesus is actually talking about your motive. That is very, very important because, again, outwardly, it might sort of exacerbate it. It might be the fulfillment of a particular motive, but it's not the motive itself. Technically, you could give privately and be doing it for the wrong motive. You could simply have a mechanistic view of God where if I loan God $10, he's going to give me back $100. Some people literally treat God like he's the stock market or he's an investment, and they think that's how. No, it is to be an act of sacrifice and worship. You should be giving not in order to give back. You're missing the point. So again, I think highlight, and you actually quoted it, which was great, but I just want to focus on it. He didn't simply say, don't give tithes. He said, don't do any charitable deeds in order to be seen by men. And by the way, the application is not only about money, it's also about prayer. So now we have to say, are any of us praying publicly? Do you pray publicly? Do I pray publicly? Well, yes, I think most of us do if we're Christians. So what is Jesus saying? None of us should pray. No more opening prayer in church. No more prayers. No more amens during the sermon. None of that.
Or praying over your meal at In-N-Out Burger.
Exactly, which I am going to do in just a little bit here since I'm in California. But no, that's not his point. His point is getting to the heart. And what he's saying is the Pharisees, their motive is to be seen and to be recognized by men. And therefore, since that's their motive, they do it in a certain way. They'll make sure there's an announcement made, there's trumpets going, and everyone's staring, and they're getting honor from men. That's what Jesus is saying. They're doing it to get honor from men. They want everyone to see how much they're giving. By the way, same thing can happen in prayer. Isn't that interesting? Jesus is warning. Some of us can do religious activities, such as pray, and it can look super spiritual. We can pray these long, eloquent prayers, and it sounds great, and other people feel kind of down. They're like, man, I don't pray very good. I don't have all those great verses memorized, and my language is kind of messy and sloppy, and people don't understand me, and I stumble and all that. Oh, they're so amazing. And the truth is, maybe they're doing it to be seen by men. So I think the key point here is not to get hung up on, the particular application or the setting. It's the principle. Because irregardless of what you do, and by the way, I'm going to mention how we do things, I think it does matter. But at the same time, let's just highlight what Jesus is highlighting, and that is the principle. So it's so important that you give or you pray or you do any good or righteous deed. You do it for the glory of God. It's not for yourself. It's not to get glory. It's not to get honor. It's not to get more money or more praise from men or pats on the back for being super spiritual. It is because you want to see God glorified. That's the goal. Now, on a practical note, I do think churches and leaders are responsible to make sure that we're not promoting the wrong motive. Again, as a pastor, I can't control why people do what they do. There's no way for me to know. I mean, I could literally, I guess, start quizzing everybody. Now, why are you doing this? And then hook them up to a lie detector test. Make sure they're not lying to me about their motive. But at the end of the day, even lie detector tests, apparently people can pass those when they're lying. So at the end of the day, I don't know. God knows. But I do think there's ways we can do things that might sort of encourage bad behavior or encourage bad motives. I mean, it's how we frame it, how we do it. I mean, and I would say this is probably a case-by-case basis. You know, I've seen some places where the whole giving of money thing, to me, in my opinion, was very, very weird, very awkward. I think it did place guilt on people. I think there was praise and recognition given to men or women, for that matter, of how much they gave or whatever, and I felt like that is definitely inappropriate and out of place. However, I think there's situations where you could give as a part of the service. Nobody's looking at you. Nobody cares. Nobody knows. It was simply, obviously, before the internet age, if you were going to give, that's how you had to give anyway. So it was simply something that was done and not something that somebody would get credit for. So I think it really does depend, and leadership definitely should address that. But at the same time, it's ultimately the heart. It's the principle.
Interesting that you mentioned how leadership should make sure that it's not, it's done in a way that's not awkward, because and then even questioning the motives of leadership, and I'm not saying this is what's happening at the churches that Artenis has visited, but maybe the pastor's thinking, oh, if we do this, then people that are still sitting down will think, oh, well, everybody's looking down on me because I haven't made so I better take a 20 out of my pocket and go up there and put it in. So then all of a sudden, now the person who stood up and gave the 20, their motives are wrong. Yeah. But then you could say the pastor's motives are wrong too, because he did it to try to get more people to make a contribution.
Yeah, and again, that those are all real possibilities. And at the end of the day, that's why I think, so we're looking on the outside. Is it wrong to give publicly per se? No. Is it wrong to pray publicly per se? No. But can there be wrong motives underlying those acts? Yes, there can be. And, should we do what we can do to sort of minimize the wrong motive and to promote the right motive? Yes, I do agree with that. But at the end of the day, it's still going to be the human heart and your motive before God.
Yep. Bobby Conway, what say you?
Yeah, Mike, what he said was great. I would say at our church, we don't pass the basket. We've done that in the past, and I actually like not doing that. It hasn't affected our giving at all, because in a world where so many people do give online, it just happens. In fact, I probably need to teach on it more. I just haven't even really had to get into that a whole lot, but it has to be a part of discipleship, obviously. But I definitely feel gun shy when I get into the topic, because I know how people can perceive us as pastors, when we're talking about that. So I always want to be a little bit careful. But I feel like for us, it's been more like, okay, you're going to have like the non-believers potentially be in there, or you're going to get people that are, it can become something of discomfort for some people. And I've even felt that, like on my insides, like if I'm visiting a church or whatever, and they're passing the basket, and here I am, I'm faithfully giving to my church, but it's like, man, I don't want to look unspiritual. So, it's like, maybe I should just, write a check so I can fit in with everybody here. Now, I don't do that. I just let it go. But I still feel like I'm still cognizant, like are people thinking, well, look at this loser, he doesn't tithe. And I just don't want anybody to feel that. So that's why I have removed that.
Well, that's what the envelopes are for, Bobby. Somebody can just fold it and drop it in there, and it looks like it was a check. But you can just put IOU. You can just put IOU on it.
How many IOUs have you given, Mike, or gotten?
Hilarious.
Right, bro.
Artenis, thanks for calling us today here on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is the number. 888-564 6173. Bob in Westminster hung up, so we're going to go to Kate in Colorado with a question on 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. Hi there, Kate.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
You bet.
I called yesterday, so I called back.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah.
So what did you want to know today?
I want to know, what does that verse mean to you? Because I know what I think, but I want to know that I'm right, but I don't want to lead into it.
1 Peter 1:6 says, "In this you greatly rejoice, though now for a little while, if need be, you have been grieved by various trials." That verse?
Yes.
Okay, so what does that mean, Mike?
It means while we're in a fallen world, we are going to be grieved to some extent. There's no way you're going to go through this life without grief. I mean, it's certainly true. Some people more than others, some people relatively mild, some people incredibly overwhelming and painful. But there's no way you're getting through a fallen world where there's sin and death and everything in between and not go through with grief. So I think first and foremost, the Bible is acknowledging what we all know to be experientially true. In this world, you're going to have sorrows, you're going to have difficulties, and faith doesn't necessarily get you out of that. And I think that kind of points back to the genuineness of our faith, because I think some of us, we want to believe when we think that believing in Jesus means we'll be rescued from any trial or difficulty. I've heard many people express that's what they think they're signing on to when they follow Jesus. Unfortunately, some presentations of the Gospels that I've heard, evangelistic messages sort of paint that picture. Hey, if you're addicted to drugs, if your spouse left you, if you're in jail right now, and just come to Jesus and, it'll all be fine. Mm-hmm. And certainly there's a way in which that can be true, but I think it can also paint the wrong picture for people. So I think what Peter's affirming is, in this world, you're going to have tribulation, you're going to have trials. Jesus said that, but he's also giving you a reason for hope. And hope is vital to the Christian faith, because hope is not, in a biblical sense, hope is not sort of the realm of possibility. In the Bible, hope is certain. It is based on God and God's character and God's plan. So for the Christian, hope is certain. And if you follow the rest of that passage, he explains what that's about. That the genuineness of your faith being much more precious than gold. So first of all, faith, I would say, is more precious to God than it is to us. I think a lot of us would be like, hey, I'd rather just have less faith and get out of this situation. But we have to understand God's hierarchy of values is not the same as ours, and we need to get on board with him. And so God deeply treasures faith that he is forming in you, in Christ, through the Spirit. And one of the critical ways in which faith is formed is through suffering. It's through trials. It is through difficulty. It burns away the dross, the impurity of our faith, and it really focuses us on the Lord. So that faith that is more precious than gold, though tested by fire, may be found. This is at the ultimate aim. This is why faith is so important, that it may be found to the praise, honor, and glory at the revelation of Jesus Christ, whom having not seen you love, though you do not see him now, yet believing you rejoice with joy inexpressible. How can you do that? Because your hope is certain and it's fixed on Jesus receiving the end of your faith, the salvation of your souls. So again, it's like a woman in labor, right? And being there and watching my wife give birth to our children. There's that terrible pain, and as a man, I really can't imagine it. Apparently, it's very, very uncomfortable, painful, and all that. And in that moment, it's almost like, gosh, my wife would do anything to be out of this situation. And then, but what keeps her going and keeps her focused is knowing what is this for? Is this pain meaningless? Do I just live in a random universe? We're all accidents. We're not supposed to be here. There's no God. There's no meaning. There's no purpose and all that. Because if so, then pain becomes intolerable because there's no positive end in sight. But for her, it was always the idea, I know what the end of this is. I'm going to see a child. And as soon as that child came, she literally said, it's all that's over. all that's gone, and all I can behold is this joy in front of me. And that's sort of the picture that Paul is giving us. Though we travail, right? Though faith is being formed and nurtured in us, ultimately, even though we do so with pain here in this world full of sin and death, yet we know what the end of it is. We get to actually see and behold Christ. Heaven, new earth, resurrected bodies, glorified bodies, no more sickness, no more death, no more cancer, no more tears, no more war, none of these things. And so we are fixing our hope on that. And that's what Peter is attempting to do here in this epistle. And that's exactly what we are called to do in this life.
Bobby Conway, does rejoicing in trials mean that we should rejoice for the trial, like all the different ones that Mike just mentioned, losing your job, or, your spouse runs out on you or whatever? Are we supposed to thank God for those things? What's the difference between thanking God for something and thanking God in something?
I think we're thanking God for what can be gained through the trial. We're not thankful if you lose a loved one, but we're thankful that God can help us through losing a loved one. And so it's like, when I suffer, I mean, I've said before, when we suffer, most people want to get out of it instead of asking, what can we get out of it? And I think that there's something to glean in our suffering. Let's face it. I mean, pain stinks. I hate pain. And I know that what can be helpful just on a therapeutic level before the Lord. I had a hard week. I don't do vacation well because I need routine. And so a lot of times I feel like we go on vacation as a family, or we go on a vacation as a couple. And, it's like we can come back and you have some great moments, but because I'm out of my routine, that's just me. So we can, we have some intense fellowship along the way on our vacations, which make, you feel frustrated. And, but either way, I felt the cloud of depression come over my life last week, and it was really thick and heavy. And I was just like, man, I hated it. My wife could tell that I wasn't in a good space. I even shared that with some friends, and I'm going somewhere with this that will hopefully be helpful on how to process pain. And in this church that I'm in, we're building some friendships, and we went to Italy with these dear friends of ours. But I shared that, man, I'm kind of struggling right now. And you know what happened after I shared? I got scared for sharing because I was vulnerable. And I realized that I still have some unaddressed trauma that I'm working through from a church where I pastored 5 years ago. And there was a lot of suffering because I felt abandoned from some friends for my relapse and didn't feel loved well. And so I'm struggling to trust people again and feeling raw and vulnerable. And it was causing some just depressive feelings to act up. And so what I had to do, because I tend to, hate pain so much, but I kind of went before the Lord and I would say, God, what good could come out of this pain that I'm feeling right now? What can I learn? And so it's like you want to bottom out your pain. Like, why am I so fearful of this pain? Why do I want to escape it? Why won't I lean into this pain? And what good can come out of this pain? And so then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, you know what? I need to deal with some unaddressed trauma. So, I've been going back to my counselor and just saying, hey, can you help me crack this nut? And so trying to work through this pain. And then I think that the good that can come out of it is, I want to be an authentic person that can help people with their mental health issues. And I feel like, God allows me to be racked with stuff, and I have to be willing to throw myself out there if I want to help others. And I see a lot of good that comes out of it. So, you go through tough times, the doubt, and then, a couple books come out of it. And so God has a way of taking the thing that you want to get rid of the most, the thing that's so hard, just my wife and I, and our, we've had so many fights, through 28 years of knowing each other, 29 years, but we're still together. And so our message is don't throw in the towel. Don't quit before the miracle happens. As a dad, I felt like a failure many times, it's just life is hard. And, sometimes I said to somebody this week, I said, I was feeling like I was in quicksand. And sometimes I just reflect on my heart and I'm overwhelmed with myself. Like, I'm just like, man, I just beat myself up. And the more I reflect on my heart and the whole, like this morning, my quiet time, I just focused on the holiness of God. And then I just felt licked. I'm like, I'm so not like this, and then it was like, I have all these mountains around me of just character defects. And I feel like I got a shovel in my hand and I'm like, where do I even begin this character growth project? And what I'm realizing is I don't know how to digest grace really well. I think sometimes I'm just waiting for God to smite me when I do something wrong. And so it's like I preach grace, but I don't really think I grasp grace. And so I think that when we understand that whether our pain's the cause of our own defects or circumstances, we can just lean into a God that is like the prodigal father. He runs to you. He loves us. And honestly, it's hard to imagine that we can just collapse into that kind of grace. And that's what I would just say. When we suffer, we're not dealing with a God that's punishing us. We're not dealing with a God that's trying to torture us. We're dealing with a God that hung on a cross in the person of Jesus and understands our sufferings quite well.
Mike?
Yeah, and I think Bobby's right. And while we don't rejoice about the trial, Brian, like as you were focused on, yet at the same time, I do think as Christians, as we grow and as we mature, and I'm not saying we can always do this, but I'm saying we can do this, we can recognize that, like kind of what Bobby pointed to, when we go through something painful, you can know God is not going to waste that pain. Mm-hmm. I think you can believe that. And you can know that whatever unique pain I'm going through, I'm going to be able to use that pain as a bridge to somebody else who will not listen to the gospel from anybody but who has those credentials of pain. They've been through the same school of suffering that I have in that particular way. Again, if you've lost a child, you're going to be able to minister to someone who's lost a child in a way somebody else hasn't. If you have a blended family, if you've gone through custody issues, if you've gone through divorces, if you've gone through cancer, you're going to be able to share the truth of God in a way somebody who has not suffered simply cannot do. They cannot do it. And I think, and again, I by the grace of God, I've gotten better at this overall. And there's times where I think I've been able to rejoice a little earlier going, hey, I can see how God's going to use this pretty lousy thing in a good way. But then there's other times where it's just so bad. Like, I don't, even now I'm like, I don't care. I just want to, I just would like the pain to be gone, But at the end of the day, God doesn't ask my permission for what trials come into my life. He sovereignly chooses and ordains. I walk through them. I trust and grow. But I know God is good, and he is ultimately working all things together for the good of those who love him.
Very good. Kate, thank you for your question today on Pastor's Perspective. And there's that music bed that says we're out of time. We don't even have time for a lightning round. We've got, well, not only do we not have time, but the questions that are on the board are too deep for just a yes or no question. So call us back tomorrow. In fact, tomorrow we're going to be here for 2 hours from 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time. We open up the phone lines about 7 minutes before the program begins, and we look forward to hearing from you, especially if you didn't get through today. Remember that we archive all of our programs on Facebook and YouTube and Spotify, so make sure to check it out, and also click the little bell icon on YouTube so that you can get notified whenever we put out a new video, and Bobby Conway's YouTube channel as well, called Christianity Still Makes Sense. For Bobby Conway and Mike Chaddick, I'm Brian Perez, and Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.